Hey y'all, I know it's been a minute. And I'm still writing. I know, I'm sad and I'm embarrassed because I've taken so long to finish the series that I started. Hey y'all, it's me, Charmise, also known as Professor Mo, and I started a series and I wanted to do some basic public speaking videos. And the last video in the series is on persuasive speaking. And it's been a little bit daunting for me, specifically because when I teach my students, it's overwhelming and it's taught over the course of 2 classes. And it just feels like a lot of information. I was trying to think to myself, like, how could I most effectively teach it without it being like overwhelming? So today we are going to talk about persuasive speaking, and I came up with 6 clear, quick things that we can talk about. I cannot find my dry erase marker, so we are going to talk about starting with a clear goal, structuring your speech for clarity, building that credibility. We're going to talk about using logic and evidence. We're going to talk about connecting emotion. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is our call to action. As most of you all know, I'm often driving with my baby in the car, and today's no exception. You guys want to see him? He's just taking a little rest. So mama is driving. So again, today we're talking about some basic strategies for having an effective persuasive speech. So the first thing we're going to talk about is starting with a clear goal. I think it's super important to have a clear goal that you can identify to the audience to let them know what you hope to gain by the end of the speech. So in the midst of introducing yourself and the topic at hand, the best thing that you can do is set a expectation. Start with a clear goal. By the end of the speech, I hope that you will donate to this organization, that you will pay attention to this cause, that you will buy into the solution that I've provided. Let the audience know what you want from them. One thing I hate is when people drag out everything and don't identify what they want from you to the end. Don't you hate that? Don't you hate when somebody talks for an excessive amount of time only to ask you to buy something? Baby, you could have said something earlier. You could have said something just a little bit earlier. So the best thing you can do in an effective persuasive speech is to start with a clear goal in mind and let the audience know right out the gate. The next thing we want to talk about is structuring your speech for clarity. The order in which you roll out your speech matters. So in the midst of having that clear goal, you then want to pick the best method of organization. So for persuasive speeches, a lot of times the order is problem solution, or it is causal, which is also cause and effect. So problem solution, cause and effect, problem, cause, solution. That happens. Monroe's motivated sequence, and then a lot of people do topical. But for all intents and purposes, I really do feel like if done right, problem solution can be super effective, and so can causal. If you have more time on your hands, then problem, cause, solution could be really effective depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Monroe's motivated sequence is a 5-step sequence that prompts action, and if done right, it eats. But a lot of people don't do it right. So unless you can really do it, don't do it. Whenever I teach Monroe's motivated sequence, I always show an infomercial. I always show that proactive commercial that Justin Bieber did. Baby, he was selling proactive. And he got you, by the end of that video, he got you to use that code to go get you some proactive. So that is Monroe's motivated sequence. And then topical, to me, I wouldn't use topical specifically because I feel like it's a lazy way to structure your speech unless you have no other way to format it. But consider the best way to communicate whatever you're trying to say to the audience, the best way it'll echo to their ears, the most effective way to get what you want. If when I teach about persuasive speaking, most of the speeches that I've had are for students to get the audience to donate to the organization of their choosing. A lot of times it's a nonprofit. Most of those speeches result in a problem solution format, because your donation or your giving in some capacity is remedying a problem for a certain demographic or for a certain community, a certain organization. It's going money or donation or some form of giving is going to be the solution or aid in the solution, fund the solution. So having a well-structured speech matters. And I always tell my students face to face, don't topical me, because I want it to hit. I want it to flow in a manner that I can't help but want to donate to the organization, because you structured it so beautifully. Because I hear about the problem and it touches me, and then as soon as I hear the solution, I'm like, boom, that's it. What's the QR code? I got to donate. Structure matters. You can't just provide information any kind of way. So consider the method that you choose. It matters. The next thing we're going to talk about is building credibility. So I love talking about credibility, because when I was in graduate school my second time around, everything that I said, Dr. Eggensberger go, what's the source? What's the source? You can say what you want in life, but having a certain level of credibility that says you've done your research or that you are an expert on said topic, what's the source? So some easy ways to build your credibility with the audience are to have a relatability statement. Make it relatable to the audience, whatever we're talking about. So, depending on the demographic, you may have to bring in something more current or something a little bit more old school, something that says we all have this issue, something that says we've all experienced this, some type of relatability statement that says we're all on the same playing field. Now let's talk. Make whatever you're talking about relatable for the audience. Otherwise, they're going to tune out. In addition to having a relatability statement, you should also have a credibility statement. I always tell my students the best thing you can do is say, I've been researching this topic. I've been researching this topic for the last few weeks, and I've done extensive research, as well as I've been here, I've done that, I've read this book. Or you can say, I've worked at this organization for X amount of years. I'm a student at this institute, blah, blah, blah. Saying that you have some type of credibility, knowledge, and experience matters. So make the topic relatable. Make sure that the audience knows that you are a credible person to speak on said topic. And then, in addition to having your one credibility statement that says that you've researched or says that you've experienced, you also want to sprinkle those oral citations throughout your speech. You want to name drop. If you don't name drop, how do we know? Drop a name or 2 or 3. Now, when I have my speeches, I always tell my students at least 2 to 3 sources. But I've been really impressed in the past where even in a 5 or 6 minute speech, I've had students I've seen up to 7 oral citations. I know you've done your research and you've done a service to your audience by making sure that you can say where you got the information from, where you got the data from. It matters. That adds to your overall credibility. A lot of times people will say stuff and I will blatantly know, baby, you didn't make that up. One thing you should not do is say research says or an article says or this data stated. Be specific. So make it relatable for your audience, even the playing field. Make sure that you offer credibility for yourself and any information that you provided. And then, hit a little name drop. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is logic and evidence. Whenever I talk about logic and evidence in the classroom, I show this picture of the Atlanta Housewives reunion. And, those young ladies always come with receipts. I think it's super important to have logical explanation and evidence for whatever you're trying to share. So how can you share that information? How can you provide said receipts to your audience? You do so with explicit examples, making sure that those examples echo the information that you're trying to provide. It further proves your point. It supports whatever problem or solution that you're sharing. Statistics can always be great. I am not a typical numbers kind of girl, but if you want to hit me like 1 or 2 statistics, I love it. But don't overnumber people because it starts to go over their head. But statistics are a really great way to further paint the picture for your audience. So that's another good one to do. And the last one, I forgot my writing. Stories. If you have a story or a testimony that further echoes your point, that 1 adds personalization, but 2 provides that logic and evidence. Your story should not substitute for other sources of credibility. I wouldn't rely on just a story, but if you have a story in conjunction, why did I say conjunction? Because I was about to start singing conjunction junction, what's your function? But if you have a story and you also have a statistic or different examples that you've researched, combine them. Don't just have a long story of your personal experience. That is not enough logic and evidence that's going to give you the credibility that you need. Now, we'll say storytelling is super helpful. And if you wanted to use storytelling in your introduction of your speech to hook the audience and then funnel in some statistics and examples, I feel like that's a beautiful thing to do. So that is logic and evidence. One of the reasons why I was a little bit nervous about talking about persuasive speaking, because that leads into the conversation about fallacy, and fallacy is kind of long and drawn out. But if you have your logic and your evidence and you cite your sources, you are remedying the idea of having fallacies and misinformation throughout your speech. The worst thing you can do is say something that's not supported, or I'm trying to find the words to say it, but like sometimes you paraphrase something, but it only actually makes it worse because you probably didn't research it. So don't not support anything that you are sharing because you don't want the audience to start saying the math isn't mathing. Like, I've had students say things and then it starts to compute with me like, wow, you're just throwing information out there. That don't make sense. Just make sure that you cover your butt and you cite every source that you have, and you don't try to go the short route by paraphrasing information rather than having an excerpt in an oral citation. I don't know. I feel like sometimes, and this is me going off on a tangent, and I don't really apologize about it. Sometimes in the class, maybe your peers, or sometimes I'm coming from a classroom environment, but I'm fully aware that public speaking can be in your workplace and things of that nature. So I'll put it like this. Maybe you did a speech and you paraphrased and everybody didn't catch it, right? Somebody did. So in my classroom setting, I might have 17 students in a class and one student gave a speech and I made a note like fallacy. And their classmates are like, oh, you ate that. No, you didn't. You're a liar. In so many ways. Just make sure you cover your butt. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is connecting with emotion. Have you heard of ethos, pathos, and logos? That is another thing that I've had to talk about when I do my lectures on persuasive speaking, and that's the reason why things get a little bit lengthy. But having that emotional connection and that tug at the heartstrings can be really advantageous when you have a persuasive speech. So when you think about the emotions, obviously there's a couple that come to mind. Maybe happiness, sadness, I don't want to say that grief is one, but grief, pride, did I say anger? I don't know if I said anger. So happiness, sadness, pride, anger, and grief. those are the ones that come to mind when I think of, some of the things that you could try to pull in a persuasive speech. Having that tug at the heartstrings, or having a story that evokes some type of emotion with your audience, can really be helpful. The example that I often provide is when I was pregnant with Donald. When I was pregnant with Donald, I had just written my first book called Things I Wish Someone Had Told Me Before I Started College. Buy it, honey. Buy it. Is this a plug? I didn't even know, right? Okay, so I was doing some public speaking while I was pregnant. And I was knee deep in my pregnancy. I was pretty deep. I still fit into my normal clothes though. But I did a speaking engagement for the Deltas. I think it was the Aiken alumni chapter while I was living in Augusta, Georgia. And I did this speech and I was talking to the kids. And in my conclusion, I wanted to give them some encouragement. And I found myself speaking from a place as a new mom because I was pregnant with my first child. Next thing you know, I'm crying. And not sobbing, just you could hear it in my voice and you can see that I'm crying. So I did the speech and I finished and I'm cleaning up. And next thing you know, a couple of ladies came over and spoke to me and they were like, oh my gosh, your speech really resonated with us, especially your ending. And I'm like, thank you so much. I thought that I did terrible. I thought that I had botched it because I couldn't manage my emotions. And they essentially all bought all the books that I had on hand. And I was like, wow, I think I'm a dynamic speaker, but I think that connection that they were able to make with me sealed the deal. So I say all that to say, having some type of emotional appeal can really be advantageous. It should not substitute for logic. It should not substitute for evidence. It should not substitute for you being a credible source and having done your research. You can't get in front of an audience saying certain information to get them angry or happy or feeling a sense of pride without all of the other stuff. It's not a substitute, but I feel like it seals the deal. It can lock things in. It can make whatever you're asking for a little bit more enticing. So emotional appeal can be a good time. Now, don't overdo it. Don't oversell it. But whatever you feel like is appropriate, go for that. One of my students did a speech for us to donate to an organization that builds wells and helps to give clean water in other countries, third world countries. And his opening was so good. It made us feel bad. I felt horrible because I said, shame on me for having running water. Why? I was literally wow, that was so genius. The language that he used to really evoke that emotion. And we were all locked in from that point because it was wow, we take advantage of what we have on a day-to-day and some people don't have that. I thought that was a really clever way to use emotional appeal so early on in the speech. So yeah, connecting with emotion can be great. And the last thing you want to do is a call to action. A call to action is to let your audience again know what is the thing that you want them to do. Scan this QR code, go on to this website, pledge 25 doll hairs, drop off a donation box somewhere, adopt a cat, whatever you want them to do, say it. That is your call to action. That is, the last thing you leave them with in your speech. What is the call to action? What are you asking for? So that's that. I feel like I did good. I'm coming up on 20 minutes. So I'm going to try to finish. So in conclusion, we talked about the 6 things that you can do to have a successful persuasive speech. Start with a clear goal. Structure your speech for clarity. Build that credibility. Use logic and evidence. Connect with emotion in some capacity, but don't overdo it. And then you want to give your call to action. So if I was going to ask a question today, I would say, if you had to give a persuasive speech today to one of your friends, what method would you use? I will see you guys next time.